Grant, the billionaire, comes home earlier than expected. The mansion is silent until he hears laughter. Following the sound, he walks into the kitchen and freezes. His only son, who hasn't smiled in months, is laughing. And beside him stands a young maid, Nia, feeding him cookies as if she belongs there. Shock, confusion, even a little anger fills him. What is going on here?
The Westwood Mansion was a palace of marble floors and crystal chandeliers, but inside, it was colder than stone. The walls echoed with silence, the kind that makes even footsteps sound too loud. Every room was perfectly decorated, yet lifeless, like a showroom no one dared to live in. Grant Westwood, the billionaire, spent most of his days hidden in his office. Business meetings, late-night calls, endless paperwork, anything to avoid the hollowness that greeted him outside those doors. He had wealth that others only dreamed of, but his own home felt more like a museum than a place to live. And then there was Lucas, his only son, just 8 years old, yet his eyes carried the weight of someone much older. He rarely spoke, rarely laughed. He moved like a shadow through the halls, quiet, withdrawn, always clutching the little toy car his late mother had given him. The boy's meals were often taken alone, at the end of a long dining table meant for 20. His father sat at the other end, distracted, eyes glued to his phone. Words between them were few, sometimes nothing at all. To outsiders, they looked like the perfect family. Wealth, luxury, power, but behind the mansion gates, reality was far different. It was a house of emptiness, a father too broken to notice his son fading, a child too hurt to ask for love. Yes, Grant Westwood had everything money could buy, but not the one thing that mattered most, warmth inside his home. The day Nia arrived, the mansion shifted in a way no one expected. She wasn't just another maid with pressed uniforms and a quiet bow. No, Nia carried something rare into that cold house: warmth. Her smile was soft, her voice gentle, and her presence filled the silence with a comfort the walls had never known. She didn't just sweep the floors or polish the silver. She noticed things. She noticed him. Lucas, the quiet boy who avoided eye contact, who slipped away whenever footsteps grew too close. He hid behind doors, behind silence, behind fear. Most staff had learned to leave him alone, but not Nia. The first evening, she found him sitting at the end of the hall, knees tucked to his chest, clutching that little toy car. Instead of walking past, she crouched down beside him. She didn't force words. She didn't ask questions. She simply sat. And for the first time in a long time, someone stayed. Day by day, she tried little things, cooking meals and leaving them near him without pressure, reading stories out loud in the living room, never demanding he join, but leaving the door open just enough for him to listen, humming lullabies while she worked, melodies soft enough to drift into his room. Slowly, Lucas began to respond. First a glance, then a nod. One evening, when thunder rattled the windows, she found him trembling in his bed. She sat on the floor beside him, holding a book, and read until his eyes closed. That night, he slept without fear. The mansion was still grand, still silent in many ways, but something had changed. With every small act of patience, Nia was unlocking a heart everyone else had given up on. To the world, she was just a maid, but to Lucas, She was becoming the first person in a very long time who made him feel safe. Grant Westwood was a man of control. Everything in his life, his business empire, his wealth, his home, was built on rules, boundaries, and discipline. He trusted contracts, not people. Loyalty could be bought, and staff were just staff, nothing more. So the first time he saw Nia with his son, something inside him resisted. She was kneeling by Lucas at the dining table, patiently cutting the boy's food into small pieces, telling him a story in a low, soothing voice. Lucas wasn't flinching. He wasn't retreating into silence. He was listening. Grant froze in the doorway, a glass of scotch still in his hand. For a moment, he thought his eyes were deceiving him. His son, his broken, withdrawn little boy, was leaning closer to someone, to her. He didn't like it. "She's just an employee," he muttered to himself later that night. "This isn't her place. She doesn't belong in his life." He told himself it was dangerous. Attachments like this never lasted. Maids came and went. Staff were temporary. He couldn't let Lucas depend on someone who might vanish as quickly as she appeared. His son had been hurt enough. And yet, something gnawed at him. Because every time he entered a room, now Lucas wasn't hiding. Sometimes he was drawing while Nia read to him. Other times Grant caught the faint sound of laughter, a sound he hadn't heard in his house for years. It was small, fragile, but it was real. That night, Grant sat alone in his office, staring at the flicker of the fireplace. He didn't want to admit it, but the truth was unavoidable. The woman he had dismissed as just the maid was doing something he, with all his wealth and power, had failed to do. She was bringing his son back to life. At first, Grant tried to ignore it. He buried himself in meetings, endless phone calls, and late nights at the office. But no matter how much he worked, something felt different when he returned home. The mansion didn't feel as cold anymore. It wasn't loud or obvious, just subtle changes that crept in, like sunlight slipping through heavy curtains. He noticed Lucas eating meals without being begged. He saw his son taking more than 2 bites before pushing the plate away. Sometimes he even heard giggles echoing faintly down the marble hallways, a sound so alien in that house it made him stop and listen in disbelief. And every single time, Nia was there. She wasn't grand or glamorous. She didn't carry herself like the wealthy women Grant had dated, but she had a way of filling a room with warmth, of making silence feel safe instead of suffocating. When Lucas hid behind her legs, she coaxed him out with patience. When he grew restless, she played little games with him. And when he was quiet, she simply sat with him, asking nothing in return. Grant started noticing her more than he wanted to. At first, he lingered at the edge of the kitchen, pretending to read emails. He told himself it was coincidence. But the truth was, he wasn't drawn there for food. He came because, for the first time in years, the heart of his home wasn't his office. It was the kitchen where his son and the maid shared laughter. One evening, he caught sight of something that stopped him. Lucas had spilled milk, and Nia didn't scold him. Instead, she laughed, gently wiping his face with a napkin, while the boy laughed too, eyes sparkling. Grant's throat tightened. He had never seen his son laugh like that, not since his mother died. That night, sitting alone in his study, Grant realized the truth he had been avoiding. This woman wasn't just changing Lucas. She was changing him, too. For the first time in years, he didn't dread coming home. For the first time in years, he wanted to stay. It happened on a stormy night. The rain hammered against the tall glass windows of the mansion, and thunder rolled across the sky. Grant had just finished a late conference call when he heard it, a soft, broken cry echoing down the hallway. It was Lucas. When he rushed into his son's room, panic struck him. Lucas was curled up in bed, his face pale and his body trembling with fever. His small chest rose and fell unevenly, and his eyes were glazed with tears. Grant froze. He was a billionaire who could handle empires, contracts, and boardrooms. But standing over his sick child, he felt helpless, terrified that money and power meant nothing in that moment. Before he could even call for help, Nia appeared. Her hair was tied loosely, and she wore a simple sweater, but her presence was steady, calm. She knelt by Lucas's bed, brushing his damp hair back with a tenderness that made Grant's throat tighten. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here," she whispered softly, holding a cool cloth against the boy's forehead. Lucas clung to her hand like a lifeline. He didn't reach for his father. He reached for her. Grant stood there, torn between gratitude and an ache he couldn't name. He wanted to do something, to fix it, but all he could do was watch as Nia soothed his son through the fever, humming quietly, staying awake the entire night. At one point, Grant brought her tea, the only thing he could think to do. Their eyes met briefly in the dim light. He wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he stayed close, silently watching, feeling like an outsider in his own child's life. Hours passed. The storm outside quieted, and so did Lucas's breathing. Finally, near dawn, the boy's fever broke. He fell asleep, his small fingers still wrapped around Nia's hand. Grant exhaled shakily, the weight of the night pressing down on him. He realized something with startling clarity. This woman wasn't just an employee who cooked and cleaned. She was the one who had brought laughter back into his son's life. She was the one who stayed up through the storm, whispering comfort when he couldn't. She wasn't just a maid. She was family. And for the first time in years, Grant wasn't afraid of that truth. He was afraid of losing it. The mansion had once been a cold monument to Grant's success. Marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled, and priceless paintings hung on the walls. But the silence inside was heavier than stone. For years, laughter had been absent, the rooms echoing with nothing but emptiness. But slowly, almost without him noticing, everything began to change. It started in the mornings. Instead of the clinking of dishes in an empty kitchen, there was the sound of Lucas's giggles as Nia flipped pancakes into funny shapes. The smell of warm butter and cinnamon drifted through the halls, replacing the sterile scent of polished wood and glass. Grant, who once grabbed black coffee on the way to work, now found himself lingering, sitting at the table just to watch his son eat and laugh with a woman who treated him like he was the most important person in the world. Afternoons brought more transformation. The living room, once a space reserved for formal gatherings, was now cluttered with toy cars, crayons, and pillows from makeshift forts. Lucas no longer sat alone with gadgets or tutors. He ran across the polished floor with joy in his steps, his small hands pulling Nia into every game. Sometimes, Grant would find himself standing in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, unable to move because the sight rooted him to the spot. His son, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. Nia laughing with him, both of them glowing with a warmth Grant hadn't seen in years. Evenings became the most unexpected change. Dinner was no longer a silent ritual where plates were cleared away by staff who spoke in hushed voices. Instead, the table was filled with simple meals cooked by Nia, meals that carried flavors of love rather than luxury. Grant, a man used to dining in the finest restaurants, found himself savoring every bite, not for the food itself, but for the atmosphere, the warmth of conversation, the joy of seeing Lucas proudly announce that he had helped stir the soup. And at night, the house once haunted by silence was filled with the softest music of all, the sound of bedtime stories. Nia's voice carried gently down the hallway as she read to Lucas. Her words wrapped him in dreams. Sometimes Grant would pause outside the door, listening, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like a billionaire standing in a mansion. He felt like a father standing in a home. It struck him deeply. Money had built the walls, but it had never filled them. Success had given him everything the world admired, but not what his heart craved. And now, watching his son fall asleep with a smile, watching the woman who had brought light back into both of their lives, Grant finally understood. True wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or business deals. It was in the sparkle of Lucas's eyes. It was in the laughter echoing through once empty rooms. It was in the quiet strength of the woman who had given them both a second chance at love. And without realizing it, Grant Westwood, the billionaire who thought he had everything, was beginning to understand what it meant to finally come home.
He came home expecting silence. Instead, he found love in the most unexpected place, the kitchen. And that day, a billionaire father discovered something money could never buy: a family.
We invite you to join Lightstories if this story strikes a chord with you, makes you smile, or stirs up strong emotions in you. Each story is meant to uplift, heal, and remind you of the beauty that comes from human connection. Share this story with someone who believes in kindness and second chances by clicking the subscribe button and turning on the notification bell. Keep your heart open till we cross paths again, because you never know when someone might ask, "Can I join you here?"